Welcome to the survivors, those of you who are here for the last session. Given that we're expecting a real return to winter, Iris is running out quickly because she's afraid of snow. But yes, apparently winter is returning in unexpected ways. So we're going to, in this last session, we're going to make it a little bit brief because I'm sure everybody is at the end of their sort of bandwidth, and I just want to begin by expressing thanks and gratitude to all of you for coming. Many of you have traversed oceans or continents or borders which are normally impermeable, except for SARS-CoV-2. But also we've had representation from coast to coast, which has been great. And despite some adversity related to earlier weather events. So thank you everybody for making that effort to contribute. And we've also had great participation online, moderation virtually, which is not easy, but also great participation. And in that vein, I have to say I'm absolutely astonished that logistically we've had virtually zero hiccups on this interface, which is unusual for the university where we are. And so I just wanted to call out the team at the back for terrific. Great work. We also have had a great team working to get the meeting going, and I just wanted to recognize them before I forget, and I normally do forget these things. But first, there has been a core HEMANet secretariat that have suffered under me for the last 3 or 4 months or more, almost a year now, because we started moving and we got thrust into things with the CBRF application in April of 2023. And we sort of surfaced from that in September of 2023, having had the best summers of our life. So many of you were on that journey with us, and thank you for your patience. But the core team, which includes Varun Arpindi, Manasa Korapalli, and Sarah Perlman, have been, and also Prativa Baral, have been really instrumental in keeping the network moving forward. They've been assisted by people who regretted to volunteer as group leaders, Steve and Agatha, amongst others, Deb Mooney, and various others have been involved in the working groups. Those contributions have been greatly appreciated. But in particular for this meeting, there's just been a huge amount of work, and I've been delightfully ignorant to most of it. And what I'm amazed by is that it's turned out so well. So Prativa, in particular, thank you for making sure. Varun, your efforts massively appreciated. Manasa, Sarah, who really have other full-time jobs, but we've corralled them in. Thanks to PHAC. And then also somebody who always helps us in the clutch, Caroline Phaneuf, who's helped us enormously given her communications prowess and also a sense of how to organize meetings like this, and has helped us bringing in event coordinators to facilitate logistics. So all of that just to say huge gratitude on my behalf. And I hope you've appreciated some of the support that's been extended in terms of the logistics, et cetera. So with that, big thanks. I just want to move on now to my presentation. I've been waiting all week for this. I know you haven't, but I have. And I like to follow some of my best dermatology professors at medical school. And they were able to pack in about 200 slides in 30 minutes. So get ready. Okay, so if we can go to, I don't have David, did you steal? Oh, there it is. David, I know your kleptocratic tendencies. Okay, so this is what we started with on Wednesday. How do we harness the current and prospective value of serosurveillance through a network? And these were some of the functions that I think were proven throughout the course of the meeting. That descriptive epi in terms of emerging risks and also addressing those risks through vaccination is an incredibly invaluable part of what is generated through serosurveillance. This is absolutely critical in the context of pandemic preparedness. We had a panel on that today, which I think was indicative of the multiple ways in which seroprevalence is a critical adjunct to the bigger picture of surveillance in the context of pandemics. But we also heard how serosurveillance and seroepidemiology and residual bloods constitute a valuable resource for research and development of diagnostics, vaccines, and therapeutics. And I think understanding that instrumental value in terms of accelerating that is going to be also very important in terms of the network functions in the future. And then it enables a literative set of S's here: scale, speed, standards, skills, synthesis, and cost efficiencies via collaborations amongst the national and international partners. And so there are a whole set of performance things where a network may be able to do things much more efficiently than any single partner. And we discuss those across multiple different dimensions. But those will be very important in the context of Jonathan Campbell's value for money analysis. So we had these objectives, and I think I have to say that personally I found the first objective of this meeting, sort of looking at the state of the science for serosurveillance, absolutely captivating and exciting. I had no idea, and this is just my ignorance, that Norway had been doing serosurveillance since the mid-1970s. So Olav, what a treasure. You rarely get 40 years of institutional memory, and he is it, and showed how longitudinal data on serosurveillance in a country has been just absolutely phenomenally important in understanding influenza over time, but not specific to influenza because they didn't. And they've done it with hospital residual bloods, right? Huge opportunity in learning from that. I will never go to the Netherlands again and have any pork-related product. But again, we had terrific insights on that front. But Michael, who's not with us at the moment, seems to be at least 6 light years ahead of the rest of the world on what we can do with serosurveillance data. And my experience as an old man looking back in time now is that those sorts of folks are light years ahead in their thinking, but they're 5 or 10 years from translation to what we're going to see. And we always underestimate the rate of change. And let me tell you, we're accelerating. We're not standing still. And the great excitement and optimism I have is from moving towards that sense that we can map out individual immunogenomics, which are going to characterize the state of your immune function across multiple pathogens and over time, which is going to provide a new era of understanding and managing opportunities to optimize population immunity. So I think we got a great taste of that, but equally so on the second objective, both with its concentrations on day one and today, I think we got tremendous insights on the challenges and opportunities of the network. And so I just wanted to say that these were the things that were covered in the agenda over the day, and I'm going to go through each of them now in detail. I've given each a half an hour, so we should be out of here by midnight. So just very high-level takeaways. We have a rich legacy of past and current experience to draw on, and I think we shouldn't underestimate that. I loved a few quotes. Surveillance is a team sport, and I think in part that team is that there's no single discipline that controls this. It brings together different sciences and expertise, and I say expertise meaning practice-based expertise, which is so important. And then also, as we heard from our selfish participant from Manitoba, the network is already in place. And we shouldn't underestimate that. We do have some networking capacity, and it's not simply confined within what CITF has done. It's emerged from others who have been similarly minded in the context of the pandemic to say, hey, we can do things together that we're not doing or we can't do on our own. We're in a new era, no concept of peacetime, so I think some sense of urgency, but the likelihood that we're going to have to exercise this machinery again and again and hopefully get better. That serosurveillance science is providing critical pieces to solving complex immune puzzles. And I think we have to keep our eye on this because there is a little bit of a sense in some places that still serosurveillance is sort of pedestrian level type of knowledge, and it underestimates the value of what I call critical basic descriptive epidemiology. And you can't do anything in health if you don't understand denominators in the big picture. And so we need to make sure that we see this not simply as instrumental to get what everybody thinks is obvious, but more as a set of entry points into answering really, really interesting and important questions. The importance of timeliness of data, and that came up time and time again, so we've got an infrastructure that we've got to work on. Getting to hard-to-reach communities, how we can really generate value out of the network, that we need to be thinking cautiously and actively about the commercial framing of this, and that those may be important network partners, but also avoiding what some suggested was a simplistic suggestion that there are no markets when it comes to preparing for uncertainty events. There are. I used to be in them when I worked at the World Bank, and there's a huge business in catastrophic risk bonds. For example, right? Uncertainty is not a place where there's no commercial opportunity. And that's important for the network because it isn't as if we're working in an area where there's no commercial activity. And then finally, positioning this in the bigger picture of surveillance. It's not that we're saying it's zero sum. It's just that we need some surveillance in the bigger picture of surveillance. So what we've done is we have outsourced 3 days of absolutely fantastic sessions. They are now up on Netflix, or soon to be. You'll be able to watch them all, and we're pretty sure this will be the most watched set of presentations on Netflix ever. So this is just to remind you all that we do have the resource of the film, of the record of the meeting. We will make available the presentations that were, in general, well, across the board, excellent, both in PowerPoint and verbatim. And that we'll use those to look at how to inform the next stages. So a few things we wanted to check with you. We're an academic institution. Many of you are also in academic institutions. Should we be thinking about a special issue manuscript? Sometimes these are ways to get the dimensions of a network in a disciplined and brief type of communication. And this is just a suggestion on the types of things that we might put in that. But looking at use cases and how we could, what's the role of seroepi post-COVID-19, the immunoassays and labs agenda, terrific session on that today. The data opportunities, which span a whole set of issues. The frontiers of science, maybe working towards a 2.0 iteration of the Global Immunological Observatory. And then I think very importantly, some frontier work on value for money, which from what I can tell, based on the responses I had to questions about understanding how much money is spent where, we could probably ask and generate some interesting evidence. But that's an idea, and it'd be great when I open this up if people want to give some thumbs up, thumbs down on that. And then follow up nationally and beyond. We have, and this is just to allow people some sense of some specifics, we have a final report of the task force that will be emerging, and in it is a recommendation for the creation of a sustainable national sero-surveillance capacity. This is a Canadian recommendation, but it will go back and revise those recommendations based on the inputs from this meeting. Mark Walport, a former Chief Scientific Officer in the UK, has been doing a review of the research response that Canada took, and his report's coming out in the next 6 weeks or so, and we will make our recommendations known to him on that front with respect to serosurveillance. There's a meeting of, we will have a meeting with the Chief Public Health Officer of Canada, Theresa Tam, and potentially provincial chief medical health officers or whatever their appropriate provincial territorial designation is. But to make sure they're aware of this. And you know, we had our provincial panel this afternoon, and I think that we have one of the strengths that we have. It's not perfect, but it's strong. We have a really good provincial grounding, and that leadership, I think, is going to be essential moving on. So that's the provincial side as part of the bigger Canadian picture. But beyond that, we also are part of a North American Free Trade Agreement, and we had terrific participation from at least 3 polls from our neighbors to the south. You're our biggest trading partner. There is the biggest amount of traffic cross-border between Canada and the United States. And to me, the work that's been going on at NIAID, the Fredericks Lab, with SeroNet, and also CDC, including the collaboration between the American Red Cross and Vitalant, those are all assets where we could be saying, how could we work together and perhaps have a North American dimension to this networking? And sometimes I say that because leveraging some of the ossification or breaking down some of those barriers that are part of our parochial provincial territorial division of labor with the feds in Canada, sometimes that's broken down when we have some partnership outside the country which says, hey, we want to move forward. So putting that on the table for follow-up. And then we heard the global opportunity as well. Concise studies, which actually Canada was a big leader in. Back in 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010 with Maria Van Kerkhove. They're ramping that up. The Unity studies, we heard from Isabel. The possibility that we develop a network of WHO collaborating centers, and our Hopkins colleagues who will be convening a Sero Summit supported by Gates towards the end of this year. So those are opportunities for us to think about how this network can be part of a larger community And I think those are going to be important opportunities to consider. So rather than this just be me, we just thought in the spirit of participation, we're going to give everybody not more than 60 seconds to respond to any one of these questions or any other question that you might want to respond to, which isn't here. But what is Hemanet's minimum viable product, MVP, right? So Mairead challenged us and showed the experience of ZeroTracker, which got up and running within about 3 weeks of the idea being launched back in April, May 2020. But can we think about what are those first things that we would need to do which would help define the network as moving forward, and again, building on things that we're already doing. Use cases that you think would be really credible, and it's not to say we're not doing thinking on that, but you may want to repeat, or you may have discovered some new ones on this. The partnerships that we need to leverage or add to our roster, short-term wins, long-term vision. Open now the floor, and I will take hands just to jump in. Rapid fire, doesn't need to be a speech. What are your thoughts? Kate. I think you can, a mic is coming, so we'll pass it around. So if you can wait 15, 10, 9. There it is.
Because we heard it when I was presenting before, reaching out to the chronic disease associations in Canada, the partnerships, Cancer Society, diabetics, renal disease and so on, to find out what would they want to monitor on a population-wide basis.
Excellent. Okay, that's a terrific idea. You get a certificate of completion for the meeting.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. And thanks for all of these insights. And just again, maybe partly on behalf of Covarnet, Marc-André can say the same. Thank you very much for including us among the partners early on since this inception. And so I will continue to promote our relationship to wherever it is that we are begging for things, and similarly so. But I continue to want to work in partnership and complementarity with because I think we can only grow together. So I'm really pleased to see this this communication going. So thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Ray.
I think we desperately need lawyers to join the group. If we can't beat them, have them join us.
All right, like that. Great. Did you?
I am really excited about the possibility of collaborations and leveraging what we have built and work with you. I think the productivity has been amazing, in these 3 days of your work. So I'm looking forward really to Hemanette. And I think the potential, because one thing that I think I would love to see is this real-time, real-world evaluation of immunity protection against infection, vaccine efficacy or effectiveness in the real-world data. And I think this is an opportunity for that to happen. So,
great. Thanks. Marc-André?
I think that we've all demonstrated a genuine desire and need to work together. And right now, the greatest barrier to that is our inability to share reagents and data. And I think it's time that we all come together and unify our voice and say, this is nonsense. It is not to our benefit or the benefit of the Canadian population. And we are all in a united front to break down that barrier, because that remains the single most complex obstacle in moving forward during a pandemic.
So, yes, second that, and maybe we could work on figuring out, maybe that's one of the pieces. It's an invitation to sign on to a consensus statement as part of that alignment, because I think getting consensus is not going to be too hard. especially if you frame it well, and then the power of allowing others to sign on. So thank you. Steve.
So as blood operators, when we moved from MSM criteria to sexual risk-based criteria, we convened an international session where we got together with leaders of opinion across the world, and we all kind of talked about the issues and where the gaps were, where we needed to fix things and do what. Then we took that and published it. And we published it in Vox, which is for us is one of the society's journals. That's for ISBT. When we were with Pilpin at one point, people were asking us why we couldn't use point-of-care tests to help diagnose H7N9, and we wrote a paper which we loosely called Why Point-of-Care Tests Are Crap. And we actually published that as well. So I think you could actually take this meeting and what you've learned here and at least put forward a position statement from the group saying that this is what we were doing, this is what we think we need to do, and this is how we need to position ourselves. And then you can start to create, you put your flag in the sand, and then you start to create the other documentation like a white paper, positional statements on potential cases, how to deal with variability in different assays, all those things, and just put them out there.
Excellent. Thank you. Sheila.
Yeah, well, I just will build on what Steve said. We often find that when it's hard to get sort of concrete things done, you can put down, we call it a pen and paper exercise, which roughly, of course, like the equivalent of modeling, it means that you figure things out and you put it forward. And you say, for example, with risk, you'll say, well, the risk is this big, but then I'm only taking this subset, so it's only this, and you start working your way down, and they say, oh, the risk is actually not that high of what we want to do. But the parallel to that is that here it will be very difficult. It's not a quick win to try and get samples tested in a whole bunch of different places across Canada and do a national surveillance. But what you could do is draw some examples of work that is being done, what we have learned today, and challenge people to come back with, how could certain amounts of data have been put together. So I think there's some possibilities there. I haven't figured out, obviously, what it is, but it's something to do with seeing the possibilities on paper.
Great, thanks. We have Derek up here in the front. Oh, sorry, my blind spot.
Not this time. I was just looking at which use cases are the most powerful, the most compelling for network development. And I thought to myself, well, maybe the question isn't what's the most powerful, but what is the most, what's often the most powerful is something that is often the most simplest. And what is compelling for network development? I was thinking about the lay audience, and it's something that we haven't talked about a whole lot at this meeting. Is how do we communicate to the lay public what's going on, and this is a very complex network, right? But how do you boil that down into something really simple that the lay audience can understand and see value in as well? Because that's the voting public, right? And sometimes it can be really hard to shift politicians and bureaucrats' opinions, but public opinion is quite a strong thing, and I think we need to think about that when we're thinking about that question.
Thanks. Thanks. I just want to riff on that for a second, because when I was at the Covernet meeting in May, Kelly Grant from the Globe and Mail was moderating a panel, and I followed up with her, and she was very interested because I said we should be thinking about serosurveillance and drawing on residual bloods as like in the way that we're thinking about wastewater, call it waste blood. And she picked up on that. I'm not suggesting that's the way we market it, because she talked to a lot of people and said we might want to look at it differently, but I think she was interested. And if you think about one of the reasons is that you have this massive resource that if it isn't looked at, it gets thrown out, right? And that may be an entry point. So I'm just stop there, but just say, I think you've got a great idea there. So Manasa.
I just wanted to say that this experience has been just like incredible learning opportunity for me, and just like having those one-on-one conversations with everyone, and then now everyone's together and like sharing those conversations among ourselves and realizing, whoa, that's so cool. Like, I'm gonna network with you now and like move this conversation forward. So that's been really great. And touching back to the point of AI and technology and, you know, the new phase, like where the future is going. Like yesterday, Google came out with like Gemini 1.5, you know, and we were talking about automating systematic reviews. And I think that's actually possible now. It's not that far-fetched. So I'm just excited to see where we're going to head, and like in terms of like becoming more efficient and becoming more resilient and sustainable. So that's it.
Thanks, Manasa. Kate, you coming back?
No, just going back to what was said before. I think one of the things we can do is when we go home and with our own families to talk about to try out with the so-called general public, which is the ones closest to us, what they think about it. My daughters call this the Dracula Project, but I think I think we need to be thinking the waste thing that you're pointing, you know, that was discussed last night. You know, if women knew that their blood was being thrown away when it could be actually really helpful, I think we need to think about not just informing the general public, but mobilizing certain constituencies to advocate for us and for this.
Great. Lori, and then Tanya.
Hello. Maybe not the Dracula Project, but maybe we can spin it some positive, and maybe we're saying that we're making every drop count, or something like that.
Very good.
Or finding a way that, you know, surveillance makes sense to everybody, like your gas gauge on your car, or like you'd never drive your car without knowing if you had gas in the tank or something. But I'm terrible at that, so I'm wondering if someone that we want to engage sooner than later is a PR firm who can help us tell our story. I've been through this exercise with another organization, and it was hugely helpful to distill what's important for us as clinicians and scientists and everyone else associated here to something that actually is meaningful to everyone else, and to be able to tell that story.
Great. Thank you. Tanya.
I just had a very quick question along the same lines. Is there a synonym for surveillance that's a little bit less controversial?
Yeah, great point. And if Michael were here, he's expunged the word from any presentation he makes when he's trying to mobilize support for his work around the GIO, in part because it evokes a lot of antibodies. And so we got to, I think the language and the marketing issues are going to be important. Varun?
I think just to add a little bit to that is everything that, you know, the comms team at the CITF has achieved. It was really great, the newsletters, and not just that, some of the studies that were part, especially the Encore studies, the regular reports that they were putting out, they were so approachable that a general public could easily look at them and understand the concept of like what's being done and seroprevalence. I think that needs to be an integral part of HEMANET, and that's what we're kind of pushing for, even at the CBRF level, that we're saying that there's going to be a communication piece to it. And that has to be done regularly so that, as you mentioned, the general public sees and understands what's being done, what's happening in the different provinces, and they can easily communicate the upcoming diseases that are emerging.
Great.
The synonym we use in blood operators is
Vigilance, yeah.
surveillance, planning, preparedness.
Vigilance.
Kind of paper exercises establishing risk.
Okay, so we've got to get our synonyms, our cinnamons working on this. You can tell it's late. Mairead, where are those renegade graduate students? Should we be convening them in some way? Should we put out a general call and say, who wants to be second-gen renegade following in our footsteps? What do you think?
You know, I've thought about this, and could we replicate this, like exactly kind of the way it happened? And yeah, it's kind of hard to say exactly how to do that, but I think some of the key things that were important in mobilizing the renegade grad students is, I think, just a willingness to, especially if you're in a more senior level position, to hear out a good idea and be like, okay, well, you know, give it a go. Let's see, give it a couple, like check back in a month. Here's your task. Let's see what you do. And that's exactly what happened with Tim and with Sarah Tracker, and that's kind of really how it started. I think looking into there's, I mean, a lot of fantastic programs around the country that have really, really keen students here included that have great expertise, that are excited to try something new and might have ideas how I get, the question is how to extract that and make that openness available. I'm not sure I have the answer, but yeah. I think it's important.
So I think I just want to raise this a little bit because we're all have bandwidth issues when we return to our other lives outside this room. But one of the great things is that we had, in the context of Zero Tracker, is that grad students were unable to be grad students as they normally were. They were in lockdown and had to behave and couldn't go out every night. But part of the opportunity might be, well, what if we created a Humanet Fellowship, right, for people finishing their master's program or something, and then we articulate a set of fellowship opportunities to work with the members, right? Not here at McGill, but people on the front lines in various institutions. And then all of a sudden you've got somebody who's going to be helping, CADM Labs figure out, well, what should we be doing, or how can we manage our role in the network? So I'm just putting it out there because I think part of what we're going to need to get the network moving is a human resource. And I recognize that so many people in this room are have less than are already into overtime on their commitments. So there may be other ideas on this front, but I'm just suggesting, because I think that's also something that you can go to prospective donors and others and say, like, wouldn't you want to support 20 young people to have an incredibly interesting experience as part of this effort to create a national serial surveillance capacity? Just throwing it out there.
I've just had an idea, actually. So you could even bring that down on an even smaller and more doable scale and do something like a hackathon. And so those are super common in the software engineering world, where you just get a whole bunch of software engineers together, give them like 3 days and say, okay, we're pitching something, like here's your challenge. Maybe the challenge is making a Canadian blood bank. 3 days, pitch your inventions. And it's like an incubator, like a rapid fire think tank of a bunch of students really just coming together, doing what they do best, which is pulling all-nighters and coming up with ideas and seeing what happens. I think that would be really, a fellowship would be fantastic, but on an even smaller scale, that's a 3-4 days, new ideas, people excited about things like that, yeah.
Okay. Manasa, you want to get back in?
I just wanted to add to that part of the AI part I was talking about before is that I don't think we have enough people with the technological IT background. Like, if you think of like Y Combinator, or like a lot of people I know in like SF, Seattle, they're just like motivated by, creating something with tech, and we just need to put a public health twist on that and like harness that.
Great. great. Okay, so some good suggestions on that front. And again, Jan, please.
So I think there's two things that come to mind as I listen to the discussion. The first is I 100% agree that you need the public on board. And I think that the public, who are the ultimate stakeholders, Canadians, do not even know that there isn't, that there isn't a national serosurveillance effort. I don't think they even know that. They don't know what likely they don't know what it means and why it's important. And I think one thing that would speak to Canadians is our uniqueness as a country. Speak to that. We're proud of that. We're so diverse that to not have something that encompasses diverse Canadians is kind of shameful. And that we had to rely on South Africa and England for the up-to-the-date news of what was coming our way. So I do think that the PR company idea is a really good one, because I think the message has to get out, and that this is something that we need to invest in. And that was my second point, is the big elephant in the room is the sustainability. So I'm the co-lead on one of the CBRF hubs, and these are going to last 4 years. I don't know what the next government is going to do with them. I'm concerned that serosurveillance will not be at the top of their agenda. So thinking about how you can find sustainability for a program that's so essential that really should be coming as a line item on the government budget is really, I think, something to think about. I have some ideas on that are very half-baked, so I won't say anything more, but those are the two big things, I think.
Yeah, great. And just on the resource question, I'm not going to speak for Michael Mina, but I think he's hit his head against that resource wall a lot recently, because he's got a very ambitious project, and the timing of it is not great, like Jen, as you're mentioning. But I think the other part of it, and this may link into, I think, one of the critical ingredients that is not simply represented by, the irrational exuberance of youth, but is also a function of entrepreneurial engagement. And as scientists and academics, we're not well versed in that. And I think what Michael's doing is he's charting a path which is outside the academic halls and trying to get a function, primarily because he thinks sustainability is going to have some major private sector engagement. And so I'm not suggesting we sell our souls to the private sector. It's just that I think we have to have our eyes wide open. And Don Shepard from PHAC this morning was saying, listen, I have the worst job in the world at the moment because my budget is going to be cut by 25% next year. And I'm in the business now of deciding what we're not going to do, not what we're going to do, which is new. That's a really tough, all too common public sector problem, unfortunately. But we should be not, as you say, not eyes closed to that reality. Also, with a shift in overall government, our federal government very likely in the next 18 months, we may find a very different approach and sympathy to financing of public health, which may, make things tougher. So not to be a naysayer, it's just that I think that those are things which are going to challenge us to be more intrepid in thinking about how to secure these functions and things. So just to reinforce, and I think encourage, I heard it through a number of the comments today, which is we want problem solvers. We want people who are going to figure out how we're going to make things happen, even though the bureaucratic issues tend to get in the way, right? And the reality is, and we've got great examples of it, you can navigate and negotiate paths where you're going to achieve functions despite some adversity. Jen, you want to come back?
Just adding back to what you just said. So I think that I still think government could be a good source, and the PR thing is a huge piece. And I wouldn't necessarily give up on that, because I think the two things that the government would like to see, what I've heard, and I'm very far from the source, but what has trickled down to me is that they want to see better data sharing. They absolutely want to see better data sharing across jurisdictions. That was made clear to CoverNet throughout the pandemic. They're just sick of the siloed data. And the other, they really have bought into mission-based science. And so if you come to them with, we want to do research, which I agree, serosurveillance is not pedestrian, you do need to do research. You're going to have to sort of hide that and make it about the mission of how are we best going to serve Canadians as scientists. So those are just my two thoughts. So I wouldn't necessarily give up on government. I know we've got a lot of pieces in play right now, but it's worth thinking about.
No, we certainly won't. Sheila.
Yeah. Look, the key is synergies. You have to build in the surveillance around things that have stable funding. So there are a lot of us here who are in roles that have stable funding. So certainly the provincial labs they're still going to be there. There are ways to make just a little bit more, just by thinking about what you do, how can I take on a little something extra that is coordinated and that will move us forward. So it doesn't always take a lot of money. I think if you come into government and say, look, we need money, that everybody says that, and it's really hard to justify it. But I think if you can show how you can use synergies from these different groups to pull together, it creates a case for, well, maybe a little more money would help to make it a little bit stronger.
Excellent. Caroline?
No, I'm just taking back the mic for someone.
Okay.
Here we go. Does anybody
All
else
right.
want it? No, not for the moment.
I think we're coming to the end. Okay, well, that was excellent. Thank you for those inputs. If you're like me, sometimes your best thoughts come when you're going down the stairs as you exit the meeting. Don't feel shy to share those by email. They're all welcome. So let me, again, just finish by thanking everybody. 3 terrific days, really exciting, and a lot to do in follow-up. But as I just come back, it's a great network, and it's a huge privilege to be part of it. And it's great to see so many leaders in different positions investing time and energy to create something that has huge public health value, and hopefully we can realize that increasingly as we move forward. So thank you, everyone. Cheers.